for a reason. If he did not want me to use it, he would remove this reason and logic part of my brain out and replace it with more faith. So, and I was of the opinion, as the saying goes, my grandmother didn't raise a fool. I'm no fool. I said, I can't believe in this. This book I've been taught is the inerrant word of God, and you're just telling me that it's a book of errors that's only perfect through faith. That's like me taking a 1982 Datsun all beat up and saying, if you believe it can be a Mercedes. If you believe. That would make no sense. You can't take a car to the car dealership and say that. No, if you really believe it, if you look at it right, it's a Mercedes. So I said, no, this is a book full of errors. And God's religion is perfect. If God has a religion, it's perfect. If he has a book, it has to be perfect because he is perfect. So I left Christianity completely. And I decided that I was, I had learned some concepts from the Bible. God was one. You couldn't fool me of that. I had also concepted that there should be nobody standing between me and God because he created me without permission from anyone. Therefore, I don't need to be taking permission from someone to go to him. If I had to be forgiven for something, it should come from him because on the day of judgment, it's going to be me and him alone. And I didn't know about God's prophets yet. I had my doubts and persuasions about that. So I decided to start searching other religions. I went back to Judaism. I studied Judaism. I found the same thing that Jesus taught about two spiritual Jews that leave the law, and Jews that were so caught up in the law that they left no room for spirituality. I studied Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, Confucianism, Wiccan, Bushido. Everything I could get my hands on, every type of ism or religion, I studied it. But there was one litmus test that I used for every religion. And whenever I met them, or the people or whatever about this religion, I would always ask them, do you have a book? Do you have a book? Because another thing I had come to the conclusion of is that if your religion is true, you should be able to tangibly hand me something and show me that this religion is true. Give me something that I can see. I don't want to hear that faith stuff anymore. I heard that all my life, and look where it got me. It got me thinking I'm driving a Mercedes running around in 1982 beat-up Datsun. I said, no, you have to show me. And so I read the Bhagavad Gita, I read the Torah, I read the Scrolls of Tao, I read the Code of the Bushido, I read the Wiccan Book of Spirits and Spells and all that other magic stuff they have. And I read all of these things, and I found something very congruent with all of it, was that there were very same philosophies and teachings in all of these major religious books. They all talked about God and his nature. Most of them alluded to the fact that God is one and that God sends messengers to us and people to us to teach us. But they were filled with a whole bunch of garbage, to be honest with you, that I couldn't logically, rationally believe. So at about the age of 17, just about the time, about 17 and a half, I gave up my search for God. And I became kind of angry with God because I said, here I am looking for you and I can't find you and it doesn't look like you're giving me any help. And I don't know how many of you know, but for a 17-year-old that is frustrated with God and the world, there's a lot of trouble he can get into. There's a lot of things he can do to put himself in predicaments when he's frustrated with the world and had come to the conception that, if there's a God that exists, then he doesn't really care about me. That's a kind of a dangerous young man. So I started doing the whole partying in trouble, going to parties, drinking underage, all of this stuff I started doing. I'm a perfectionist at heart. So when I was a Christian, I tried to be the best one I could. If I was going to switch to being any other religion, then I was going to do that 100%. So you better believe when I went after the dunya, I did that 100%. And I was a martial artist since I was 15 years old, and even though it was only 2 years, 2 years at 17, you think you're Bruce Lee. So I got into a lot of fights. Got kicked out of school, had to go to another school, got in one fight, got arrested for a fight, and there were a couple incidences that stopped this downward spiral because I was on a very, very quick downward spiral and I believe if I would have continued on that downward spiral, I would probably end up hurting someone, killing someone, or them hurting or killing me. And there were two incidents that brought that to an abrupt stop, like pulling the emergency brake. And the first one was a car accident that I was in. My friend and I were on the way back from Clemson University. from a frat party, and we were driving up 385 in South Carolina, and we were both highly intoxicated, and I decided that night that he was driving. I decided to put my seatbelt on for the only reason that I kept falling over when I fell asleep without the seatbelt on. Because I didn't really believe in the seatbelt thing, because I said, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die. You know, that was the conception that I come up with, that if it's time for me to die, it's time for me to die. I didn't believe in the whole time your camel thing. So I put on my seatbelt, and I fell asleep. And the next thing I know, I remember waking up with the car shaking, and I woke up to grab my friend because I thought maybe he had fallen asleep. But when I woke up, the only thing I saw was the tree line and then the pavement coming right at my face, and the window smashing and the car flipping, the whole 9 yards, and us landing in a ditch. And I remember getting out of the car. That was the first thing I thought. You know, I number one, I couldn't believe that. You know, you don't really think about, oh, you're alive. No, you just move. I jumped out of the car and realized that I had jumped out of the back of the car that wasn't there anymore. It was still in the median on the other side of the highway, and the front part of the car was over in the ditch. And I drug my friend out, who was knocked unconscious, and pulled him over to the side of the road. I had no injuries. I looked at myself trying to find what's missing, and there was nothing but a piece of glass stuck in my arm that I pulled out. And it just so happened that a state trooper was passing the other way, because he turned around and came back. And when he came back, he asked what had happened. And the first thing he asked me was, did you see what happened? Because there was other people who would pull over, so I guess he thought that I was a bystander, because I started to walk towards him. He's like, did you see what happened? You know, where are the people? I said, yeah, I really saw what happened. I was in the car. You know, and he was like, you know, as they say, like the color drained out of his face, because he was shocked. He said, how were you in that car? You know, and of course they took him to the hospital. My friend got arrested, DUI. But before he put us in the ambulance, he was a man of God, because he looked at me and he told me, he said, young man, you better realize that you're on this earth tonight for a purpose. The only reason you're still alive is that God has a purpose for you. If not, you don't live through things like that. People without purpose, if you didn't have a purpose, then this night would have been your night. So you need to realize that. I said, this old man's out of his mind. You know, if God had been looking for me, he had the opportunity to get me a long time ago. So don't tell me about that God stuff now. So I paid it no attention. And about a month later, 3-4 weeks later, my friend and I, same two, he's on crutches still, we decided to go to New York City. We decided to just take off, drive to New York City. We didn't tell our parents where we were going. I said I was sleeping in his house. He said he was sleeping in my house for the weekend. So we drove to New York. And in New York, I remember going to the ATM to get some money. And in New York, they have these ATMs where you have to go in the little glass room to get your money at ATM. I don't know if they have that here, or if any of you have been to New York. Now, alhamdulillah, you have to put your bank card in to go in there. But in 97, it was not like this. You went in, and it was almost like the game Mousetrap, because you go in, take out your money, criminal comes right in behind you. There's nowhere for you to go. You know, there's nowhere to run. So I went in, I took my money out of the ATM, and I heard the door open behind me, you know, so I turned around, you know, I thought somebody was coming in behind me, and there was a man who put a gun to my face. And he must have really, 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 really needed this money, because he didn't ask me anything. He didn't say a single word. I just remember looking at the gun in my face and him pulling the trigger. And it was a revolver, and to this day, I'll never forget that image in my head of seeing that little spindle turn and hearing that very distinct click of a revolver. And it probably could have been like a 32 snub-nosed gun like this, but when it was in my face, it looked like one of those like cannons that you see on the movies. And I remember when he pulled the trigger, I didn't think anything. You don't think anything. You just blank. You just go into this like shock of blankness. And then a couple seconds later, thankfully I had been doing martial arts. That might have helped me overcome the fight or flight syndrome, because all I could think was, go! You know, like myself kicking myself, like, what are you doing? Go! So I bum rushed him. We went flying, he went flying, money went flying, gun went flying. And I took off and went to the hotel and didn't say anything to anybody. We went back to South Carolina the next day. And I didn't say anything because we weren't supposed to be in New York. My grandfather would have killed me. If that guy didn't kill me, my grandfather would have took care of it. So I didn't say anything until about a month or two later. You know, I kept having nightmares about this same incident. I kept having night terrors from